Or how do you interpret 1 Samuel 15 verses 3 through 5? Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Did those donkeys, infants, and children contribute to the sin in those cities? The topic of discussion is 1 Samuel 15:3, or the smiting of the Amalekites. Interlocutor takes the stance of textual literalism, which argues for a face value interpretation of said text. My argument is 1 Samuel 15 is expressing hyperbolic rhetoric, which is reminiscent of ancient Near Eastern war customs, and also there is extra-biblical and intra-biblical reasons to believe that Amalek was not entirely destroyed, as my interlocutor suggests. This rigorously, my argument is separated into 3 layers: the textual evidence within Scripture, the ancient war rhetoric conventions, and theological intent. First off, the textual evidence in the Bible itself directly contradicts my opponent's claim. Had he read the entirety of 1 Samuel, 1 Chronicles, and 1 and 2 Kings, he would have come to the same conclusion as most of the academic literature has concluded, that, in fact, no, the Amalekites were not wholly exterminated. In fact, in 1 Samuel chapter 15 itself, it corroborates this notion.
1 Samuel 27:8. And David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites, and the Jezrites, and the Amalekites. For those nations were of old and inhabitants of the land, as thou goest to Shur, even unto the land of Egypt.
In 1 Samuel 30, a rogue band of Amalekite raiders invade Zilkad, I believe that's the pronunciation, and kidnap David's men's wives, and around 400 escape. Amalekites are then mentioned again in 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles, and the Book of Esther. Not only do we have sufficient intra-biblical references to argue the entirety of Amalek was not destroyed, we have sufficient extra-biblical references from Near Eastern contemporary sources to further vindicate this notion. These inclusions are coming from protest or propaganda war in the Old Testament books of Kings and in contemporaneous ancient Near Eastern texts. This is coming directly from the Mesha stele, also known as the Moabite stone, which is a stele dated to 840 BC, which contains a significant inscription to the Canaanite king Mesha of Moab. Here in the Mesha stele, you see that this totalizing rhetoric is a normal phenomenon in the ancient Near East. It's not lying in a strict sense. It's more of a way of expressing decisive victory and covenantal judgment instead of statistical extermination. A safer, more modest interpretation of 1 Samuel 15 instead of a genocidal pronunciation would be to decisively break their power as a people under divine judgment. On to part 3, or the final segment, which is the theological dimension. Why Amalek? What is so specific about Amalek? What role does Amalek play in this story? And how do you parse theological justice next to texts that sound like complete destruction? Amalek, yes, truly is a historical enemy, but more importantly, Amalek served as a effigy of anti-covenantal hostility. Saul did wage a real campaign and inflict severe damage, but the total annihilation is again just a rhetorical convention reminiscent of Near Eastern customs, nothing specific. Saul's act is to be the final culmination of God's judgment, resulting in the disbanding of the Amalekite nation. The real fault line, from my opinion, is divine justice versus delayed judgment. Does God have a precedent to revisit iniquity? Or what is the justification for relenting punishment? Does God have the right to judge life at the levels of nations and not individualistically? In short summation, 1 Samuel 15 is best described, if I may, a temporary extended act of divine justice against a corporate moral agent, expressed through the idiom of ancient warfare, culminating in a decisive but not necessarily exhaustive historical judgment.